What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of How to Build a Garage. We've got a lot done, a lot accomplished. We still got the major finish work to be done. But as you're watching this thing, if you got any questions, drop them down in the comments. Hit that thumbs up if you like it. And of course, if you find value in what we're doing, hit that subscribe button. But for now, let's get right into it. The other kind of unique, cool feature about this garage is that we're going to be installing versetta stone. So it's called stone, but it's actually a cast concrete panelized stone veneer system, and we've done it on a few jobs. It's going to be on both sides of this garage door. It's going to add a little bit of, uniqueness to the project, not make it so commercial looking. We've got our burnished slate wainscot at the bottom, but when we come across the front, we're going to transition to a stone wainscot. So I'll take you through putting that up. First thing I got to do is I'm going to install some felt paper behind it. That way in the cracks, you won't see the white block it house wrap, you'll see black. So it'll just look like shadow lines. First thing I'm going to do once I get the felt paper ran is I'm gonna make an arbitrary line. I'm just going to measure down 10 inches on both sides of this wall. And the reason I'm doing this is because I just want a reference line. So I already know that we shot this trim on here and it's level. This line is going to be parallel to this line, and all I'm using this for is what I have found with the stone after installing it many times is that it doesn't always stay perfectly consistent because the pieces have some randomness to them. And by always relying on them being consistent with this line, I know when I get to the top, everything will stay somewhat in line and look good, and that is the most important part. So this is the versetta stone here, and it comes in a 2-pack. These are about mid-50s, upper 50s, $50 for a pack of this. So right here in this bundle is 4 square foot. I guess if you divide, that's about 12 bucks a square foot for the material. And you can see this is sterling ledge stone. So you see when I flip this around, it's a cast concrete, and they use a colored aggregate, so when you make your cuts through this product, it still looks natural. On the top, you're going to have a groove, just like think vinyl siding. The bottom is a tongue that will set into this groove right here, and then you've got this nail fin that is cast into the concrete, and that's what you're going to fasten it with. First thing I got to do is, when installing it, there's little tongues also that stick out on the ends, and I've got to cut them off flush so that it can go right up against my trim. Now, like I said before, that snap line is just a reference line. I know it's running level and parallel to my trim, so I'm just going to use that as the guide to set the top of all these panels. And then I'm using a truss head screw. It works out a little bit easier. You got some ability to pull those screws quite easily if something isn't exactly where you like it, which you'll find out later. They don't all just go up perfect. As you can see, I already found that the first one is off. As soon as I screwed the other side, it must have rocked it just slightly to the side, but that is why you always double check. Make sure that your top stays consistent with that reference line and you will be okay. So now remember, what I'm doing is not necessarily making these level, because if you put a level on the tops of these, it's not always going to read perfect. But what I'm doing is I'm using a reference line and checking the edges to always be the same. And that is the most important part, because then I know there might be a little inconsistency through the middles of these, but as long as they always kind of hit the same line, I know I'm okay. Now, one thing to note, and kind of what I was talking about, is I put this piece in here, okay? It's right where it should be, but these don't line up perfectly, and it just doesn't look the same. So what I've learned is that with versetta stone, you can't just put them up in the order you get them. You almost have to grab the next piece in line. See, that one doesn't work either. Boom, just like that. That one is perfect. I'm good here. Measure over this side, and I'm good. So that's just the way it goes sometimes. They don't always, you know, just go up easy. You got to kind of put them up, make sure you like everything before you fasten it. Once you get going, it's a lot of repetitive work, but you're always checking those reference lines. And when you finally cover up your reference line, then you're just going to measure off the J channel so that your reveals are consistent across the top. The other thing is I'm using a cordless Milwaukee chop saw. It's just the 7 1/4 cordless chop saw. You can see it is a little bit dusty. I've since gone out and gotten an IQ Power Tools dustless vacuum saw that is awesome. I'll definitely drop some links down below so that you guys can check those out, because if you're interested in cutting this stuff, it will make your life a ton easier. Now, when laying out your versetta stone, you can make sure that you end on a full piece. I wanted it to match my wainscot, so I had to rip down the top pieces, and I just used a circular saw with a masonry blade, but you can use a grinder. And as far as fastening that top row, you don't really have to, but I have used a PL 400 in the past. What always amazes me about this product is you clearly see the panels going up, but once it's done and you can kind of sit back and look at it, I've had so many people stop and ask who the stonemason was. They didn't even realize it was a panelized system. Here's a good example of the way this works. You can see the gap back here, and that helps the water make its way down and not stay between it and the wall. Versetta Stone has really done a good job at making sure that the overall look of this product is really good when it's all finished. And you can use it inside, outside, but for us, it's a great feature wall on the front of a building, and customers absolutely love it. Pretty happy how this stone finished out. We basically terminated it right on a J channel, and then our outside corner will cover this and set right on top of our double angle wainscot trim. Stone does give it a good look. Kind of breaks up the norm of just having steel. I like it. A little bit different. Really wish we had our windows though so we could finish that stuff. We are back. We've been gone for about a week. Job today is to put the windows in. We've got our walk door to put in. Trim all that out on the outside, and then on the inside we have to do some trim work and run upper steel. So these are Simonton windows here, 4x3, low E, vinyl. Good window. I like these when they show up properly. So you can see inside we've got to run a piece of trim above the plywood, and then we've got a white, that's just a cover sheet. We've got white liner steel that'll go up on the ceiling. And he said, "Let there be light." Much nicer than looking at the backside of steel. Perfect. Windows are easy. When we have to come back and put windows in, usually all we have to do is make sure we get to the last sheet behind the window. And then it's always easiest to at least be a full sheet in the front, but for these shorter ones, it's not too bad. We can tuck that last sheet into up underneath this sheet and get it back into that J channel. This one fell right in the middle of 3 sheets, so we had to take 3 sheets off here, but we were able to get away with just 2 sheets. So Greg is marking out the window locations, just using a simple level straight edge. This is kind of a junky level, but it's nice and straight. And this window's a little bit unique, but we always mark 1.5 inches. This is where the actual window frame is. We go past 1.5 inches on the top. but we go right to it on the bottom, and we do that so our J channel overhangs. I'll show you that. Well, did not realize that we were making way too much noise when I recorded this little tutorial how-to. So I'm just going to do a little voiceover on the video. It's going to be a little awkward. You're going to see my lips moving, but not matching what I'm saying. I've got my first piece of J channel. It's for the bottom, and I showed you there's a little 1-inch notch out, and that is going to accept our side trims. So really nothing special. We just measure the width of the window, add 1 inch each way, and then we make sure we cut that out so that trim can go in there. I know there's probably a lot of you out here watching this that might either disagree or agree with what I'm doing, but I do not like to install my J channels around my window and then caulk. I like to caulk and push my J channels into that caulk, and I do that because I don't like to see the caulk. I always, on any detail on the building, I always try to mechanically flash water away from wherever it's not supposed to be, and if I have to use caulk, I will. But in my opinion, caulk will fail over time. A mechanical flashing should last for the life of the building. Now this trim here, it's got a 1-inch bend, and then I've got this little bit of a 45. It doesn't go all the way to the point, and this is going to tuck right into that 1-inch notch out. But also, if you look here, there is a hem on the inside of this edge, and I'm going to tuck this part of the trim right in that hem. Then what I like to do with this little bit I leave long, I make sure everything is nice. Come in, snip it off. And what that does is it also helps lock this in, keep it looking perfect. Now these are the cordless Hitachi nibblers. This is what we use to cut up our end walls. Basically anytime we're cutting over top of the ribs, we're going to use a nibbler. But as you can see there, they're getting dull. How do I know that? Because they're creating this long trail of metal versus snipping out little pieces at a time. So we're going to go ahead and change those right now. Much better. You can see it's spitting out little pieces of metal, which obviously you probably want to go around with a magnet after you're done and pick all those up. They can get in your shoes, and that is why we always use separate shoes for the roof than what we are on the ground using. Now whenever we get to the point where we're just cutting flat steel, so here we're going parallel to the ribs where we're not going over top of anything, we're just going to use a double cut shear. It does a really nice job. It does leave those little curly cues, but at the same time they're kind of satisfying to watch. I'm not quite sure where my footage of us installing the steel around the window is, but apologize. I'm sure you can look across the channel and see us do that many times. Here I'm showing the top J channel, how that goes in. So we leave that off, install our steel, and then we just get a measurement from those notches. If you remember, I go 1.5 inches each way, and that is 1.5 inches wider than the width of the window itself. So once I've got that J channel cut, I'll show you how it goes in. And all I'm going to do is slide that piece of J channel in from one side and tuck it up underneath the back of that steel. And that's where the flashing is going to push the water side to side and go out over the steel on either side of the window. So that's the goal. We don't want water trickling in, and I think the way we do it works quite well. I don't get callbacks for windows leaking, and in the end, that's the main goal, right? If you've seen one window installed, you've seen them all. So I'm off to the interior, and if you remember, I made those 2 punch marks up on the ceiling for our attic access panel. I'm just going to level them off, make a couple straight lines, and snip them out. That's going to give me my hole for my attic access. I've already got my framing up there, so my goal here is to just cut it out, get some trim in there, and I kind of trim it out just like a window. while Zach's running this back wall steel. We're kind of utilizing the lift at the same time. We've only got one lift on site, so we're trying to be as efficient as possible. And the other thing is we always try to put this attic access somewhere in the back up against a wall. So if anybody needs to get up there when we're all done, you can just set a ladder and get up there. But honestly, once the building's insulated, once any wiring is ran, you should never have to go back up there. And we don't want you to, because we don't want you to ruin the insulation that's been blown. And you'll see that here soon. This piece of plywood will get covered with steel on the bottom, and there will be insulation on the top. But for now, I'm just test fitting it. So my GoPros are about dead. I'm not going to be showing much of the process, but pretty much like you have seen in past videos, this time we're using a little bit better, the best I can buy here. Matches the BCX sanded plywood, I think, pretty well. I'm making a simple Jamb extension, and then we will case it out with matching pine. Pretty simple. Got about 7 windows to do, nothing too fancy. We got our flashing up here on our header. Then we'll do our jambs. Got the back wall done. We've got our attic access installed. I still need to put a piece of flat stock on that, which I've got here. And that's so the guys can get up there and do a blown in fiberglass. Not that I'm like being, paid to promote, but I've got this 36 volt brushless Makita chop saw. It's the 10-inch version, and I love it. It is so smooth, it cuts like a dream. And then also the DeWalt 60 volt table saw. I just like being cordless because I don't want to have to run cords, and I also don't want to rely on my customers having power for us. So it's nice to have good cordless options these days. Makes cleanup easier, makes setup easier. I got to apologize, guys. We are just going to town. I've got today and feels like today only to wrap this up. So we can see here, we got the front basically done. I'm just finishing up this outside corner detail. On the inside, you can see we've got 2 more windows to take the steel off of and install. Greg's wrapping up the back. Zach has been working on the liner steel on the inside, and then I've also been getting windows trimmed out as we go. One last thing I've got to do next is finish these door jamb flashings for the overhead door to go, and then I can put the last piece of plywood on each side and the trim that will clean this edge up, and we can wrap our steel. So lots of little things to do, and I've got some GoPros up. Hopefully they'll pull some good footage for the end of this video so that we don't end on a low note, but rather a high note. And I'm really loving the way this one's turning out. Anybody would want to have one of these in their yard. I would surely think so. So we are back at this job that we've been away for a while, and it is mostly due to some supplier issues. The biggest thing was we were waiting on some shutters, and also had some wainscot that was accidentally thrown away. So, contracting is not always perfect, but we've got all that stuff in, and we're wrapping this up today. Come over here, you can see we've got our gutter up. All the water's going to the back. There's a downspout going out. Concrete is going to be coming soon, and I know that is always asked to be seen. You can now kind of see what's going to happen here. Our white trim here is at top of concrete. So the goal is always to keep these concrete piers right below the finished floor height, or the bottom of the finished floor, and then this is what gets filled in. That way the slab is floating up against this grade board on the inside, and it's not actually all the way out to the outside wall, because remember, this cavity is filled with insulation and helps keep some of that cold from creeping in. finishing up some screws around the perimeter. So real quickly, I'm gonna pop up in this attic space, show you guys what the blown in fiberglass looks like. It's gonna be hot up there. I know it will because it is hot outside and it's gonna be hotter in that attic space, but I wanna show you what it looks like. Oh yeah, here we go. It's gonna be dark. So I'll turn my camera phone on. First thing you're gonna see when you come up is my installer puts these papers here. Let me get my flashlight. Put a 13-inch of an R38 down here. They tell me, you know, more specifics, what the job was for, who did the job. That way we've always got some place to go back to. And then looking out here into the space, you get an idea what that looks like. Here, what they've done is they put a, see if I can zoom in here. They put a nice little ruler here to show you the amount that they've blown in. So it usually will settle a little bit, but now you can really see when I say that we're using a fiberglass blown in, the way it works. And you can really see these attic air deflectors, as we call them, how they work. It allows us to get a full R value all the way out there at the eave, but not block up here where our soffits are going to vent. So nothing real fancy, but now you get an idea when we do these buildings, what's happening up here. It's definitely really hot up there. I didn't want to spend a lot of time up there, and I would hate to be the guy installing it, but it's pretty necessary to have that space insulated. That's what really is, that's way more important than your walls. That is why I always say, you know, if you're gonna spend money on spray foam for your walls, I just don't think you're ever gonna recoup that cost, not in my climate, because most of your heat loss is gonna go up through the attic. So spend your money there. Feel free to blow in an R40 or 45. My guy says that there's a diminishing return after that R40 area in my region. So you're basically just paying for insulation, but not necessarily gaining any more because it's a diminishing return on your cost to insulate. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm not a building science expert, but conceptually, I mean, it makes sense. And that's what I did when I built my own personal shop. And then you can spend money on an access door. We just make one that you can just lift back up, and there's a piece of insulation on the top of it. So that just prevents, you know, a little bit of heat loss at this point. Pretty simple but effective. The only time you're ever gonna come up here is if you wanna re-blow in a little bit of insulation. Shouldn't have to, or if you wanna drop a wire somewhere. But a lot of questions always about why there's no electrical when we start. These guys definitely wanna do some conduit so they can add or move as they want without having to ruin any of the interior finishes. Best part of the job, Greg. See what we've done here on these is I have these made and then we notch out where the ribs go. That way these legs here of this thing will give it some rigidity and it doesn't want to flop around in the wind. Last thing you want to do is make a nice building and then come in and have your sign not level. I always find it important to put this guy in. Sometimes Jimmy DeResta taught me that if it looks straight, it is straight. It don't look straight to me, does it to you?
No, it's crooked.
It's gotta go this way. About there? Yeah?
I'd say so.
I think that looks good. I'd buy it. This is a hard one. Nice. Take a back step here and stare at it. I always like it when we can do this, but I think I like it more when the customer requests that we put the sign up, Greg. Agree?
Agreed.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed another build series. This is a 30 by 40 residential garage, and we got a little bit of unique features. We got the wainscot here. That's versetta stone on the front, and actually our first time using a garage door, customer choice, that is matching the trim. So we've got a dark brown garage door. I'm pretty stoked about that, and yeah, it's gonna be a nice place for the customer to work on his hot rod he's got. Now, this may be the finish or the end of our contract. This is as much as we're going to do, but I will get back up to this job. I will show you guys how that concrete turns out. So hit that subscribe button to follow along. And like always, thank you so much for the support. I appreciate all the comments, feedback. Keep it coming, and I will continue to put out this content. Thank you, guys.